Welcome back. My name is Chris, and in this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive on saved searches. Now, saved searches are not unique to NetSuite. You can find them in all different types of software. And the term saved search refers to a search. In other words, you've looked for information and you've actually gotten back information. And then the saved element refers to the fact that based on the parameters that you've set up for your search on what you're looking for and what you got back, you can save that so you can utilize it again at a later date and time or make it available for others. So when you're looking at saved searches, there's really two key components that you need to think with. The first one is the criteria, and the second being results. So criteria is really the filters. What are you looking for? So let's give a fictional example. Let's say you have 100 customers and you want to do a saved search on these customers. So one of the criteria might be that you only want customers that are female. So that might limit it down to maybe 45 customers. You might add another criteria that you only want customers over the age of 30. So you've again limited it down. Maybe you only have 20 customers out of the full 100 that are now coming up. So now that you've selected these 20 customers, you now want to get certain information from them. So that would be the results. So for example, you'd probably want to know the name of the customer, how much they've spent with the company, probably the last time they purchased an item, as well as maybe where they live. So these are all relevant information that would be part of the results along with the criteria that you originally searched. So that's an example of what a saved search would be. Now let's take a look at a real saved search. So here we are in the home dashboard, and there's actually a lot of different ways you could pull up a saved search from here. But if you're looking to make a new search, there's really one primary place you would go, which is up to the Reports tab. And you would come down here to New Search. Now, before I actually go into this, I do want to point out that I've made a video called Reporting Tools in NetSuite, and that covers the 3 types of reports that you can pull up in NetSuite. And the first one is called Reports. So those are really the simplest, they're the most out of the box, off the shelf. You can easily use them. They don't have a lot of customization features, but when you're looking at things like income statements or balance sheets or lists of all the customers by sales representative, you often just want to be able to pull up something rapidly and you don't need to customize it any further than that. So those are reports. They're the easiest to use. Next up, we have saved searches, which I'll be describing at length in this video, but you can understand the concept is that saved searches are much more robust. They have a lot more customization features. There's just a lot more you can do with a saved search. One of the downsides is it does take a little bit of time to just get familiar with saved searches. And then secondly, they're not good visually. They really are just rows of information. They're not graphically interesting to look at. So the third reporting tool is Suite Analytics. And to get to Suite Analytics, you actually go to this tab here. Suite Analytics can do everything that saved searches can do and some additional features, like if you want to add pivot tables where you have a lot of different criteria on both sides of that table, you can use a Suite Analytics for it. And they're especially great for doing any kind of visual representation. So you might notice on your dashboards, if you have these really creative looking graphs or line plots, those are often made using Suite Analytics. So reports are definitely the simplest. Then up from that, saved searches has an additional layer of complexity. And most people would argue that Suite Analytics is another layer of complexity. So again, I have a lot of different videos that cover everything from reports up to Suite Analytics. So if you're interested in those, please check those out. I'm going to go pretty rapidly through this lesson. If you find that I'm going a little too quick or you want a bit more information, just check out the courses and look at the videos specifically on saved searches. So now that we're here, let's go back to our tab. Again, we have reports. So that's what we're looking at here. And a new search would be, as the name implies, if we want to create a brand new saved search. But also you can come down here. These are saved searches that have already been created and have been saved to this window. So if you have ones that you use a lot, you can always save them to this window so they're easily accessible. But in this case, we do want to create a new search so we can really go through this whole process. So I'm going to click New Search. And it brings me to this list. Now, again, remember, the 2 core components of a saved search are the criteria and the results. And if you think about it, this is actually the first place where you're actually dictating what's the first criteria of this saved search. So if we scroll down here, True to NetSuite style, they have literally every single possible type of record that you could ever do a safe search on. Now, this list should be overwhelming because it's obnoxiously large. And 99% of these options here, you will never use, you will never have a reason to use. There's really a handful of types of safe searches that you would ever use. And the most common by far is a transaction-based safe search, which you can actually see right here. So that would cover anything from sales orders, item fulfillments, invoices, cash payments, purchase orders, vendor bills, all of these different things, credit memos, they're all considered transaction type records. And if you want to search anything related to them, you would do a transaction-based search. If you wanted to look at something like, let's say, customers or even partners or vendors, you would do what's called an entity type search. So that's another pretty common one. And there's a few others that you might want to use. Let's say if you do projects a lot, you might want to do a project type search. Or if you're looking for specific types of accounts, you might do an account search. But again, the hands down most commonly used search is going to be a transaction search. And the vast majority of these options here, you're never going to have a reason to use. So let's click on a transaction search. Now, before I go on, I do want to say if you're finding this video helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and let me know down in the comments below if you're finding this video helpful and what other videos you'd like to see. I make a new video every single week, and I really love to hear back from you guys on what other topics you'd like me to cover. So in the meantime, let's get back into this. So at this point, we've now limited down. Our search is now just to transaction records. And it brings us to this page. Now, the first thing I'm going to comment on is we have this use advanced search. If you are familiar with, I'm going to click this button here. It comes checked, so that's the default. If you select it off, it's this more old school style of search. And if you're used to this, you can certainly use this format. But I'm going to be sticking just to the advanced search because it's a bit more user friendly. So we're going to have this on the whole time, and I'm only going to be operating within the advanced search. So once we're here, you're going to see, as I pointed out before, we have criteria and results. Those are the two core components. Now, there's a lot of other things that you can do with saved searches, but at this point, we don't have a saved search. We just have, as you can see up here, we have a transaction search. We haven't saved it yet. So all these other features are going to come in a second. So first off, let's just stick to criteria. So when we're talking about criteria, in my opinion, this is really the hardest part. If you're dealing with saved searches for the first time, this is the steepest learning curve, is getting the hang of criteria, and especially understanding how to match what you want to search to what NetSuite understands. So let's take an example. Let's say we wanted to search invoices that were from the past year and only those that are over $1,500. So that's pretty straightforward. We can easily articulate that. But when we're putting that in NetSuite, unless you know how to do it within NetSuite, it would actually be quite difficult to pull up that exact type of saved search. And the first thing we're going to look at, I'm going to go in order of most commonly used criteria. We're going to click here and we're going to click mainline. So mainline is basically specifying, let's say we're talking about an invoice. An invoice itself is a record, but that invoice also has line items. So that one invoice might have 10 different items that were contained within it. The question is, when we're doing this search, are we just looking at the invoice record, or we want to look at every single line item included in that? And whether you go one way or the other is whether you clicked mainline or not mainline, also known as mainline true or false. So in this case, we're going to set mainline as yes. In other words, we don't want all the line items. In this case, we just want to have the invoice as a full record. So we're going to click set on that. The next thing we're going to specify is what transaction record we're even dealing with. And in this case, we're looking for a type. So the type is going to be an invoice. So we're going to go down here and click. This is all the different transactional types listed here. And you could select multiple. Maybe you wanted to do a search for sales orders and invoices. You could select both. And so we're going to select invoice, yes. Again, I'm going through this quite rapidly. If you really want to get a much slower, more in-depth review of this, I have videos that cover this in great detail. So the next thing we want to take a look at is date. We specified that we only want the date to be within the last year. So we can actually click here and we get these quick filters, and I'm going to go to year and I'm going to specify in the last year. So it automatically fills in the dates there. I'm fine with that. It's within that last year. So I'm going to hit set on that. So now I have main line, so I know I'm just dealing with the invoices, not all the line items. I know I'm dealing with invoices because the type is set and the date is in the last year. The last thing we need to specify is the amount. So we said that the amount is going to be greater than or equal to $1,500. So let's specify that and we'll hit set. And we're good to go. So this is good. This is exactly what we wanted on the criteria. Now let's take a look at the results. So if we go over to results, it kind of automatically pings us down. So up here, this is just some basic information in terms of how you sort the results and if you want them to be shown a certain way. In most cases, you don't really need to influence any of these things up here. Really down here is where you're actually looking at the results. And in this case, it actually gave us some results automatically. And you might think, well, why did it give us results, but it didn't give us any criteria? The reason for that is by choosing a transaction-based safe search, we already specified to some degree what type of search. We already specified that criteria limited to transaction. So it kind of automatically said, listen, you probably want these results. And if you do, that's fine. They've got some good results listed here. But in most cases, when you're doing a safe search, you're looking for something particular. So the odds that this kind of shotgun approach is going to be effective for you is pretty limited. So in most cases, you're going to want to come up here and just click remove all. So we've wiped out the results and we can start from scratch. So you can see down here, we have a field and we can specify what first result we want to select. So again, we've limited it to invoices over $1,500 within the last year. Now that we've specified all those invoices, we probably want to know what is the name of the customer that the invoice is tied to. So we're going to click name. So we'll add name. We'd also probably want to know the date of that invoice. Now we wouldn't have to put type because all of the things we're going to see, they're all invoices. So we don't really need to get that column, but we would want to take a look at something like amount. So we want to know, we know that it's over $1,500, but how much over? What is that amount of the invoice? Another thing we might want to add as a result is potentially the status. Status is something you often will set on the criteria. So if you wanted to only look for invoices that are maybe pending, then you could select that as a status. We didn't have that as something we wanted for our particular criteria, but you might want to see the ones that are pending fulfillment or pending approval on that invoice. So we can add status so we can see all that information. And we're going to reorganize these. You can click on the little braille dots on the left. And then by grabbing these little braille dots, you can actually move these things around. So for example, I want date to be at the top. And then I want it to go the name, the status, and then the amount as the last thing. We've put in the criteria, we've specified our results, and we're going to come down here to submit. And right away, we now have a search. So at this point, it's not saved yet. We haven't actually saved any information, but we have exactly what we were looking for, which is the date on the left. We have the name of the customer for this invoice. We have the status. Now, these are all paid in full, but if we scroll to the bottom here, we'll probably, here we have some that are open. So if we go through, we can see at the top right here, we have 600 invoices that came up. They fulfilled the criteria. There's probably a few that are pending approval. And then on the far right here, we can see the amount. And notice there's not a single invoice here that's under $1,500. This one comes close at $1,600, but they're all over $1,500. So this is exactly what we wanted. Now let's make it a saved search. So we're going to go to save this search. We'll click on that. And now we're basically brought back to the same area, but instead of just having criteria and results, we now have all these additional options. So first thing we're going to do is specify what are we calling this thing. So let's just call it test search for invoices over $1,500. So I just gave it a basic name. And then over here, we have a lot of criteria, including this public selection down here. What this is doing is basically specifying when we create this safe search, where do we want it to be available? So for example, when I showed you in reports earlier, down here we have saved searches. This is a window. If we wanted our safe search to be available here, we could specify that with these selections. Maybe we want it to be available in the reminders portlet. All of these different things you can select as options. And then if you want the safe search to be available not only to yourself, but also broadly to any NetSuite user in your instance, then you can select that public button. So the first thing I want to show you is actually over here, this summary button. So if we click on this, basically, we can do a normal safe search or we can do what's called a summary search. And that's one where instead of searching for individual items, it's going to group items in a certain way. And the best way to give an example of that is to actually go to the results, because you can make a summary search on the criteria side and on the results side. So I'm going to scroll down here. So you can see we also have this summary type, but let's say we wanted to do a summary search that shows all the criteria joined together. In other words, everything that fit our criteria, we want them all added up in one amount. So the way we do that is we click on amount and we would specify the summary to be a sum. Now you can see the other options here. You might want to select what is the biggest invoice or what is all the invoices grouped together, like how many are there. You can do a number of different things, but in this case, we wanted an aggregate of all of them together. So we're going to click sum. Now, there's one interesting thing about saved searches, which is, I'm going to show it to you. If we hit OK on that, so we've only changed one thing, right? We only added sum on the amount. You would think it would only make a minor difference to the search itself, but take a look at this. If we hit preview, notice instead of getting that huge list of 600 invoices, suddenly we have no information, only the sum of the amount on the far right, which apparently is about $13 million, is all these invoices grouped together. So that's not what we want. So we're going to go back to return a criteria. And the reason it did that is because as soon as we select any of these things as having a summary, what it does is it makes the entire saved search a summary search. So what I mean by that is we can no longer see these things like status, name, date. We're only seeing the summary search right here, so sum. So if we want to see these other things, we need to make them part of the summary search. So for example, name. Let's make name. So we've got all these different customers that have purchased things, so we can see the invoices for them. But maybe instead of seeing all of them listed out, so let's say one customer has done 10 different purchases and has 10 different invoices, maybe we want to see just that one customer and we want all of their invoices to be grouped together. The way we would do that is we would click group. And we can hit OK on that. Now, if we go to preview, we get a very different view. Now you can see we have all the customers, but instead of having duplicates where we see, for example, Devavu, we don't want to see Devavu once and then twice. We now see all of the Devavu invoices all grouped together. They've spent $26,000 with our company. And you can see that for all of the different customers. So that can be very handy in many different instances. So we'll go back to return a criteria. And I'll come back down to results. So we'll go to group and we'll basically get rid of that summary search. For the sake of the rest of this video, we don't necessarily want a summary search, but you understand the basic concept of it. And again, on the criteria, you can make summary criteria searches. And really, that's basically saying that when it does the search, it's going to, if you selected the amount as being summary, it's going to look not just for invoices that are over $1,500, but it's going to look for the total to be over whatever amount you specify. So it's less commonly used as a feature for criteria, more commonly used for results. Coming down here, a few other things I want to point out. So over here we have custom label and then also summary label. So labels are basically, when you're looking at the saved search, there's the columns, they have a label at the top of them. So let's take, for example, name. The name is a bit general. It's not very clear what we're talking about there. So we might want to call the name customer. So we can go to custom label. We can click on that and we can say customer. So now when we go to that column in that saved search, it's going to say customer at the top and we can hit OK on that. And summary label is the same thing, but just for a summary search. So if you've already made it a summary search, you would want the summary labels to be appropriately named. The next step we have is function. So function specifically is referring just to a couple different types of results, mainly amount and date. And so let's say we click on this date, we can specify the function as age in dates, let's say. And really what this is doing is it's saying instead of showing you the field as just a raw date, it's actually going to show it to you in a way that you might find more helpful. So if you wanted to know not just what date it was, but you wanted to know how many days ago was that, you could specify age and date. And if I hit OK on that, let's do a preview. It wouldn't just show me the date, it's going to show me an actual number. So this is 109 days ago this invoice occurred. You can also see that custom label specified here, the customer, it used to be said name. So that's that basic function. Again, that's pretty limited in terms of its usefulness, but if you have a reason, especially for the amount figures or the date figures, to give it to you in a certain way, you might want to select that function. In the meantime, I'm going to get rid of that. I'll hit OK. Now, formula really is referring to an instance where you're going to specify a much more complicated formula where you're giving circumstances and conditions. You might say, if this situation or this situation, then do this thing. That is Usually more if you have programming experience or if you're very familiar with things like Excel formulas, etc. If you already have familiar with those things, then you can start putting them here. If you're not familiar, it's a bit of a steep learning curve on getting used to them. I have made a video on how to use formulas and some of the tricks to kind of get the hang of them. So you can check that out. That's on the administrator's course. I should mention the fact that when we're talking about formulas, if you want a very advanced safe search, which is really looking into, again, certain conditions will result in certain things and other conditions will come up with other things, you're not able to just do that with the standard functionality of a safe search. You need to use the formulas to be able to achieve some very, very specific results. So you do have that option there. And if you want to get used to them, again, you can either check out my video or check out some of the videos made for how to get used to learning Excel formulas. There's a lot of those, and you can kind of just get a feel for how those work. When you want to do formulas for criteria, you can come up to criteria and you can see you've got the formulas tab on the right. You also have the use of expressions. If you want to add, it's kind of a simple way of using formulas, you can add those in there. So that's basically it for the criteria and the results tab. Next up, we have highlighting. So this is super straightforward. If you have a list, obviously you've come up with certain criteria and it shows certain results. You want to add some additional highlighting to really point out certain things. So let's give an example of this. We're going to come here and we're going to select this little button on the right here. And it basically pulls up this window and it says, what are you trying to highlight? So let's say we want to highlight the amount. And it's going to say, all right, what do you want to do with the amount? You're going to say, I want the amount. Let's say, so we've already limited these invoices to being over $1,500, but maybe any invoice that's over $15,000, we want to specifically highlight because that's a big sale. So we're going to go greater than or equal to $15,000. And I'm going to hit set on that. And that's fine, that's all we want. So we're gonna hit set. And what we can do now that we've highlighted that, now we can specify, well, how are we gonna highlight it? Do we wanna add an image for that thing? Do we wanna change the text color? If you wanna just do kind of a yellow highlight, you'd click on the little color palette here. And let's say we just do yellow, that's pretty straightforward. You can also make it bold. You can add little descriptions. Let's say you want it, so if you ever hover over the thing, you want it to say big sale, we can add that. So let's preview what that's gonna look like. So now we come to this page and we can see all of these different invoices that are over $15,000 are all highlighted. And if I hover over them, it says big sale. I also can go all the way to the bottom here and there's a legend at the bottom. In other words, a little description of all the different highlights that are occurring. So if you add like 20 different highlights, certain things are bolded, certain things are blue, other things have a yellow background. You can put all these different things. You're gonna want that legend at the bottom because if this safe search goes to someone else, they're not gonna know what the criteria are for the highlights. So they're gonna have to look at that bottom to see, oh, the blue, that means it's over this certain date or whatever the criteria are for those highlights. So that's the basic concept on that. We're going to go back to our criteria. And so that was highlights. So now let's look at the audience. So audience is basically where you dictate who is going to be able to access and view this saved search. And in most cases, you're going to want to simply go over here and select public, which you can see it selects all automatically, and any role now has access to at least view this saved search. And again, in most cases, that's totally fine. You do not need to worry about certain situations where you have sensitive information. Let's say employee salaries. That's information that you only want limited to certain roles, probably certain payroll people and maybe the administrator. But that's dictated by role. That's not relevant to what we're talking about here. Just because you had a salary saved search and you gave it access to every role, that doesn't mean they're now able to access that information. They could see that it is a saved search, but when they pull it up, they wouldn't be able to see anything on it because they don't have access to that information. Really, you're just specifying, do you want these employees to be able to see this saved search or not? And one additional thing is this allow audience to edit. In most cases, you wouldn't want just any random individual to not only see a saved search, but also change the parameters of the saved search. But let's say you're an administrator and you're setting up a saved search for one of your sales representatives. You're making the search for them. So if they are familiar with NetSuite, they know how to use safe searches, maybe they want to make little adjustments to it to better suit their needs, then you might want to click on this, which allows basically anyone who has audience access, they can now make edits to the safe search itself. Next up, we have roles. And this is really where we're specifying, this is more for an administrator, and this is where you're specifying what roles have not just access, but also have this as a preferred safe search or their default safe search in certain instances or in certain locations. So again, this is really more just for the administrator. And if you know that you want accountants to always use a certain type of safe search, you could specify that here or for anything else. Next over, we have emails. So this is an incredibly useful tool. And this is where you not only create a safe search, but you're able to now send that out as either as an email or as an attached file to go out to various individuals. And there's two ways you can do that. You can either do a scheduled search, or you can do what's kind of like an alert search. So a scheduled search would be, there's many different instances where you'd want to use one, but an example would be, let's say every week, at the beginning of the week, you want to send all the sales information for the past week to some of the key executives in your company. So you can make that as a scheduled search. It would simply take all the information that applies to that safe search, and it would email it out to those various executives based on what you set. So you can go down to the sublist here, and you can see this is where you specify what time it will go out, how often it goes out, how long will the safe search go on for. You can specify all of that information here. Now, the second type of email setting is the alert. So that would be either for very good things or very bad things oftentimes. So let's say there was a sales order that was over $1 million. That's great information. That's something you want to be alerted to immediately so that you can act on it, making sure that sales order is being fulfilled, etc. That would be a very good circumstance. And the bad circumstance, or maybe in something that you just want to kind of keep an eye on, you might have certain accounts that no random employee should be posting having any kind of GL impact to that account. You can set up an alert where if anything happens to that account, it immediately sends an alert to either you or maybe the CFO. So that's a way to kind of monitor that, make sure that nothing weird is happening in that circumstance. So those are some basic examples of where you might use both of them. Now, the way you would set which type you want is you can either click here to set up a schedule, and it will automatically select some of these other features that relate to schedules. Or if you don't want a schedule and you just want it to be an alert, you could select it to send email alerts when records are created, updated. So that would be that second type that I described. So down from that, we have specific recipients. So this is where you're dictating who is this email of this safe search, who's it going to go out to. So you can list all the different people there. And then over here, customize message. This is really where you're specifying what is the message that's going to go out to them. So for example, if we're sending out a weekly sales report, you might have basic information, dear, and you can actually select these dynamic fields where it'll automatically fill in that person's name. And it'll say, Dear Joe, here's all the basic sales info for last week. And it would fill in this amount was the total sales for this and this. You can put all that custom information in here. You can put a header line, etc. You can also specify who's it coming from up here. And then in the bottom here, you can specify how is this safe search going to be given? Is it going to be an attachment to the email, or is it going to be contained in the body of the email itself, which in some instances can be quite messy. So only if it's a very limited type of safe search, maybe an alert that goes out in one particular, it would just be a row, one item. In most cases, you'd want to include it as an attachment. So now that we've done all of that, we're going to take this off. So we're not trying to set up an email for this particular safe search, but we do want to save this. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to save it. All right. And we've now officially created this safe search. So one other thing I want to show you, if we go back to our home dashboard, let's say you've now created that safe search and you want to add it onto your dashboard as a portlet. The way you would do that is you come over here to personalize. Let's click on that. And we have this custom search little tile. We're going to grab that and we're going to drag it down here. And now that we're done with that, we're going to close this. So we have this blank custom search, and here's where we're going to set it up and basically specify what safe search we're grabbing. So we're going to click on this hyperlink for setup. And here's where we're going to select the search that we just made. So we called it test. So I'm going to go list and I'm going to put in test. And you can see it immediately comes up, this test search invoice over 1,500. That was the one I just made. So I'm going to click that. And I do have other features here. For example, if I want to have the results to be limited to a certain amount, I could specify that. But for the sake of this video, let's keep it very simple. We're just going to hit save on that. And we immediately have the search that we just generated coming up as a portlet. So if you ever have certain things that you want available on your dashboard, you can easily create that as a portlet saved search. So I've walked you through how to create a new search, but As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, saved searches are really throughout NetSuite. And there's going to be so many different instances where you're going to be on a page, you're going to see certain amounts of information. And at the top, you'll often see certain filters. There might be just a couple, there might be tons. Anytime that you're looking at filters, really, you're looking at the opportunity to create a saved search. Because if you think about it, a filter is basically criteria. So what you're setting is the criteria, and then any of the information below it is really the results. Whatever you set as the criteria and as the results, you can actually save that to create a custom saved search for, again, whatever that thing is. Maybe you're looking at lists of fixed assets. It doesn't matter. Any of those instances has the opportunity to create a custom view or search, etc. As long as you think with those core components of criteria and results, you can really take advantage of that functionality. It's also important to note that there's searches available throughout these tabs. So if we come down here, for example, oftentimes in my videos, I go through these navigation bars, but in most instances, I'll either click here, let's say for sales order, or I would click on the list to see all sales orders. But keep in mind right here, we have the search capability. And if we go around, you'll notice it's actually in so many different places. So if we do that, let's say enter sales order, if I click search, instead of going through that whole process of originating the saved search, specifying the criteria, it automatically brings me to a transaction saved search because a sales order is a transaction record, and it automatically fills in the criteria type as sales order. So it just cuts out several of those steps to give me exactly what I want. And you can do that with practically any record that you can find, or even any function in many cases, up here in these tabs. So always keep that in mind and really try to get the most out of the efficiency using these searches. And that's it for saved searches. If you found this video helpful, please leave me a comment down below and let me know what other video you'd like to see. If you want more information about saved searches, be sure to check out my other videos either on the basics course, the administrator's course, and I also have a number of them included in this YouTube channel. So I'll see you in the next video.